going to build a great Christian movie and we're going to make Hollywood pay for it. Why do Christian movies suck? You're listening to Constructive Interference. All right, so government shutdown, day 19, if you can believe that, and gangs are parading the streets. Everyone's asking for my loyalty like it's a Fallout game, and I've had to pledge my life to at least one or two different clans to ensure my family's safety. Just kidding. Actually, everything's kind of remarkably normal. Josh Hugo, are you safe and sound down there, or is everything falling apart where you're at and you need government to come in and save you?
Well, you stole the Fallout reference, so I'm out of jokes there. And I didn't actually see the Mad Max movie, so I can't make any real good jokes about that. So I'll just say no.
Well, that's where I was going next.
But no, everything here in Central Texas is completely and absolutely normal during the 19th day of the government shutdown.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, because anarchy is the norm in Texas.
Yes. Yeah, we have like the roving biker gangs anyway, so, it's not really much different for us here. But
right. Yeah, they didn't even know there was a government. It's Texas.
Right.
Come on. A government? What government? What are you talking about?
I do live near Austin, the capital, which they say is like the New York City of Texas. So
I don't even know how to make sense of that. The New York City of Tech. Like, I don't even know how to make sense of that statement.
You don't need
those
to.
Two
it's
things.
Okay.
That's like the hot part of the North Pole.
Well, basically, I mean, it is the capital of Texas, and so it attracts the capital of any place. The Washington, D.C. isn't unique in attracting the liberal blue type of population. And so Austin is the blue part of Texas, essentially. Texas, for the most part, is, deep red, famously. Less so than in past years, but still very much a red state. But Austin is a dark blue area in the middle of the red area. So,
which is pretty much
which has nothing really to do with whether or not there are biker gangs roaming the landscape.
Well, true. And there's probably a future episode there on the divide between urban and rural America, which, might be the most significant divide of all. But for now, we do have a government shutdown on our hands. Everyone's freaking out about it. We just had dueling speeches by the president and the opposition party last night. And they're almost, they seem to be fighting over a wall. Now, isn't that a silly thing to fight over?
You'd think so, yeah. It seems like a silly thing to fight over because, according to polling data, about 80% of Americans, which of course includes a majority of Democrats, about 80% of Americans are actually in favor of securing the border in some way. The word wall is unpopular. It depends how you phrase the question. But if you simply ask the question, do we need to secure the southern border, almost everybody says yes. So it is a really weird thing to be fighting over, that being the case.
Fair enough. But yet we still have a government shutdown over it because nobody's willing to give an inch on this. And what's funny about it is, we had, and a lot of, more conservative types have pointed this out, that we had complete GOP control for 2 years, did not get a wall built. And now all of a sudden, when we've just lost the House to an incoming wave of Democrats, now people want to get serious about the wall. I'm a little suspicious of that timing personally. I don't know about you.
I mean, a cynical person might think it was like they were just trying to keep a wedge issue open, as if they didn't really care about getting it done and just wanted something to use as a stick or a carrot to prod voters.
How dare you?
A cynical person might think that.
Politicians are always sincere.
Yeah, I'm not saying I think that. I'm just saying a cynical person, not me. A cynical person might feel that way, though, and get that impression. But
I've been reliably told that politicians never lie. So I think you might be a little too cynical on that. I could be wrong.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. They do keep the biker gangs off our streets, I mean, the reason we don't live in Mad Max land is because of our good politicians looking out for us. So I should give them more credit.
Gee whiz. So why haven't the Republicans got this done then? Why? Okay, so the situation now is with the incoming Democratic House, there is one house of the legislature that is now controlled by Democrats. The other house is controlled by Republicans, as well as the presidency, and of course the new balance of the new presumed balance of the Supreme Court would be in favor of Republicans. So what's stopping this? How long is this going to drag out? Why can't Republicans get this done?
Well, I mean, that's of course a complex question, but one aspect of it that I want to talk about is, I guess, messaging, the ability to sell an idea. So like I said, almost everybody, most people, Republicans and Democrats, agree with the statement that we need to secure the border. Pretty much everybody agrees that this is a problem. But Republicans, for whatever reason, are unable to sell this idea. If you listen to the rhetoric coming out from the Democrats, like Pelosi and Schumer got up in their response to Trump's address last night, they frame this as being some sort of an issue of compassion, basically. If you want to build this wall that proves that you are an uncompassionate person who doesn't care about the plight of children who are trying to cross the border, or whatever. So my thing is that the Democrats do a really great job of selling this in emotional terms. If you listen to what Pelosi or Schumer or Hillary, who somehow is still around,
is she still a thing?
She's still a thing, yes. But yeah, if you listen to their rhetoric, and this is almost a quote from the DNC email from the day before Trump's speech. Basically, they're saying the crisis is that the people who are coming over are suffering. There were those infamous pictures of the families being separated, put into fences, people living in tent cities. There were a couple of kids who died recently in Border Patrol custody of dehydration and exposure. And according to the Democrats, that's the crisis. That's the real problem that needs to be solved here. And I don't want to talk about how honest or how right that portrayal is. I just want to talk about the optics of it, the marketing. Like, that's great marketing. That pulls on the heartstrings. You think about, these people who are suffering, they're being separated, kids are dying of thirst and whatever. So therefore do what we want.
Yeah.
And the Republicans are they just can't sell. Trump can.
That is the absolute truth.
Yeah.
Republicans could not sell. They couldn't sell bottled water in the Sahara.
No.
They really could not.
No. But Trump, I've referred to Trump sometimes as the king of salesmen, because that's how he strikes me. So Trump can sell somewhat. His abrasiveness, hampers his ability to sell a bit, but the Republicans in general can't sell anything, and which is weird because in this border issue should be so easy to sell border control using the same sort of sales pitches the Democrats use. For example, you have these children, the Democrats mentioned these children who are coming over and they're dying of thirst in the desert. Isn't that horrible? Well, you can take that exact same story and say, well, that's why we need to have border control. It's like we have these families being separated, these children are dying. And really, Trump also mentioned this in his speech. The people who do come across the border illegally suffer all sorts of hardships. I think it's something in the area of 2/3 of women who try to come across the border end up being sexually assaulted in some way on their way up here. We have numbers up to 20,000 in some years, unaccompanied minors, 20,000 kids coming across the border without parents, without family with them. And a lot of them, they just disappear. We don't know what happens to them. Mm-hmm. So from a humanitarian angle, it's like you could sell this border control thing from the angle of we got to stop this. Because all these women are being assaulted, we got to stop illegal immigration. Because these children are coming across and dying or disappearing, we have to stop illegal immigration. But Republicans don't use that angle. Republicans don't take those emotional hooks that are available to them and use them to sell the way Democrats do.
I can imagine there's some circumstances where I appreciate that because I'm not a super big fan of emotional arguments. But then again, I am a robot, so that's a little bit different for most people. I understand, but why don't they use those? Now you would think that, and okay, in fairness, there have been a few of those, right? So we had Kate's Law. That was a big deal for a while. You had the whole MS-13 dust up. And so there have been some emotional hooks pulled in, but so why do you feel like that's not being used enough?
Can you review that for me? What was Kate's Law?
Kate's Law was the law that was related to Kate Steinle, who was killed by an illegal immigrant in California, I believe.
That's what I thought. Okay. And there we go. I think that kind of almost answers the question because Republicans, there are some rules that they seem that they need to follow. And one of those rules is that Republicans always have to be perceived as tough on crime. And that's something that they won't compromise on. So the Kate's Law, again, that was, you say, an illegal immigrant committed a crime. And so therefore that's a hook Republicans are allowed to use, because they can use their tough on crime card to use that, use the victim of a crime and appeal for border control on that basis. But the people who are coming across the border that I mentioned, the women who are being abused, the children who are coming across unaccompanied, according to our laws, those people are criminals. And so Republicans can't portray them in a sympathetic light while keeping this death grip on their tough on crime card.
Well, that does present a quandary, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, that's the main one.
Okay, so they have to stay tough on crime, and they don't want to bend anything on immigration, because people might say, well, that means you're going to let all these people get away with it. And I can be somewhat sympathetic to that. The problem is where we're at with our policies, and particularly with just the sheer volume of laws that we have and regulations in the United States, there are many of them that have created very stupid problems. And there's frequently, it's not a zero sum, right? It's frequently a choice between bad and worse, or good and better. And I think this is one of those situations where, yes, in a perfect world, we would like it if we hadn't spent the last 50 years completely screwing up our immigration system. But since we did, we might want to consider some sort of a measure that works with reality to accomplish something that people actually want. And that's where I think you look at these poll numbers and you start to see areas of agreement between the far right and the far left, and saying, hey, well, we may not like most of what each other has to say, but we can at least agree on a couple of things, and we might be able to give a little ground in the middle and say, well, okay, well, let's secure the border, and then we'll have a separate discussion about what to do with people here. But there are a lot of folks who I think gain money and popularity and activist street cred by immediately just crapping on whatever ideas for compromise there are. And that's really unfortunate, because it shuts down a lot of these things, and it produces more of these rules that you're discussing that really stop us from any productive conversations.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you're focused on following some sort of rule or maintaining some sort of image, regardless of other factors, it destroys your ability to act effectively. And I mean, let's face it, no matter what you want, like I know there are some people, I put a poll on my Facebook this last week basically asking, hey, would Republicans be willing to settle for a compromise where we don't deport all the illegal aliens, some of them get to stay, but we have border security as well? And I got the results I expected. A solid majority of the people of my page, most of whom are Republicans, voted and said, yeah, we would be okay with some sort of compromise. We're not super hardliners who demand that all of them have to go.
So 4 out of your 5 friends.
Yes. Of course, that's not a scientific poll by any means, but I do think it is, broadly reflective of attitudes. I don't think most people, because there are so many illegal aliens who do live in the country. I think probably most of us know one or know somebody who knows one. It's like these are not like strange or frightening people for the most part. And so I think it's a problem with a very significant human face, and I don't think that the average Republican is really – I'm quite confident that the average Republican is not a hardliner who's going to demand they all go. Most people are going to be open to some sort of a compromise. But the politicians, they can't say that because they got to maintain their tough on crime image. They got to follow that rule, and following the rule, sticking to the rule no matter what, makes them, ineffectual. And I think that's the case with the Republican Party in general. They got to seem like they're tough on crime all the time, even if the laws are stupid. Even if there's some absolutely ridiculous law that should be abolished and taken off the books, Republicans still have to say, "Oh, we're tough on crime."
Yeah, or if police officers are clearly out of line and there's wrongful deaths and wrongful shootings and misapplication of force involved, yeah.
Yeah, even then, no matter how blatant the offense is, no matter how blatantly wrong, and I'm not trying to crap on cops here,
Sure.
But there are some times, in some cases, where the cops are blatantly wrong and have been blatantly abusive, and Republicans are just like, oh, well, we support cops, because we got to, because we're obligated. Another rule for Republicans is they're never allowed to make an attack that makes someone sound mean. Democrats feel free to just come out and say, oh, Donald Trump is, he's a Nazi. He is Donald Trump pulls children out from the arms of their mothers while they weep. They feel free to use that sort of imagery. But Republicans have this rule. They can never make any attack that sounds really mean. They got whatever they say, it's got to sound nice and respectful.
Well, I don't know how long that's going to last, because there is a sizable segment of the right now that is definitely getting a hearing from the broader movement for that very fact, and saying, well, it's time that we charge back and hit him with, fight fire with fire, and hit him with exactly. And that's the large segment of Trump's electorate that actually catapulted him to office that believes that. So I think there's a reckoning coming in that. But what other areas do you see another area where we might be hampered by rules?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's not. Well, before we go into that, I guess got to say that but when I say that, as far as the rule that you can't make mean attacks being a hindrance, I don't mean to imply what some people on what you call the far right or the alt-right would imply, which is that simply insulting people and belittling people is good in itself. Insults are okay when the insults are true. If you have something mean to say about somebody that is factually accurate, like if someone really is tearing babies out of their mother's arms, well, it's okay to say so. Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying there, I don't mean to say that we should all be insulting people and calling them names. I just mean that if you should not be afraid.
Like a true cuck. Unbelievable.
Hey, it's not. I've been called that.
You don't know how to own the libs. Don't you want to own the libs?
Well, see, that's the thing, Joel. Is no, I don't want to own the libs. I would love to convince the libs. And
I thought you were going to say something about property value.
Oh no. Well, I would only want to own their property if I bought it fair and square. But yeah, that's the thing is you're focused on you want to own the libs, you want to destroy the libs. Well, okay, but if you own and destroy, you're not convincing. And if you're not convincing, what good are you really doing? If you totally
also if you own and destroy, you better have good insurance. But I digress.
Yes. Oh, many jokes there, but I'll abstain. But yeah, so it's like, well, all I'm saying is that if someone really is bad, it's okay to describe them accurately. You don't gotta put on kid gloves and go out of your way to talk nice about somebody if what they're doing is actually really bad.
Sure. and that's why there's a lot of I'll just say that partisan strategists have caught on to that fact. And so now everything that happens is horribly bad, terribly inexcusable, fascist, communist. Everything is a gigantic moral crisis now. And if you're not out in the streets burning things, you're not doing your part to resist tyranny. And that's a result of exactly what you just said, is that they know that they can justify anything if you make something look bad enough. So I think we'll have, again, there'll be a national reckoning that we have on that pretty soon here. But so what I was trying to lead my co-host into before,
I'm sorry,
and he didn't take the bait. No, is we promised that we were going to discuss Christian movies and why they're so terrible. And since we were talking about rules, Josh had an interesting theory as far as Christian movies might actually be hampered by a similar effect as what we've been talking about with The Wall.
Well, yeah, I mean, so like the Republican Party is unable to message because of their rules, and I think that weirdly there's like a synergy there with Christian entertainment, where Christian entertainment is oftenly not able to message effectively, because of its rules. I mean, it's sort of a meme, it's sort of a joke that Christian movies are always terrible. Have you experienced that? Has that been your perception of Christian movies, Joel?
Oh yeah. It absolutely has. And interestingly, we threw this question out on Facebook this week on social media. And if you have not been following us on social media, then you probably missed this. So make sure that you go out to facebook.com/TheCI Show and on Twitter @TheCI Show. Make sure you give us a follow, because we're having great discussions out here talking about how terrible Christian movies are, and you need to be a part of that. Jamie got on there and said Christian movies are just cheese. This is comments from the question that we asked, and said they don't show real people. Nobody talks the way they do in these movies. The acting is bad. The plot's predictable. I know they could do better. There's good actors out there, good writers. I feel like the bar is set low, and Christians will consume it because it's about Jesus, and we don't require quality. We need to demand more from our movies. We have Debbie on here, who is definitely a Kirk Cameron fan. Says she still likes Kirk Cameron in any movie. Timothy says one of his favorite Christian movies is Risen, following the Roman praetor as the lead character was genius. I will admit I have not seen that. And then Mark also added, most Christian movies leave me cringing because the characters are not real people and the dialogue is stilted. The subject matter is limited to topics acceptable in the church. Go figure. And so, yeah, there's an active discussion that we had on the page, but a lot of it was very similar to the thoughts that I've had on it, which is, it's just, I really want, look, I was raised a Christian, okay? I am very familiar with Christian culture and church culture and all these things, and I really want to like Christian movies, but I can't bring myself to do it. Like, I'm sure these are wonderful people that are putting this together, and I would never say any of this to promote myself and say, oh, these people are doing terrible, why don't you let me at it and do it better. I fully believe I would wreck everything if you put me behind a movie, okay? I'm not saying that I know all the solutions, but I'm just saying, when I look at Christian movies and I think if they have this hard a time capturing my interest as probably the friendliest audience imaginable, then how in the world are they actually going to, do what they're meant to do and expand the message beyond, the choir? How are they going to do that? And so that's kind of the discussion that we had. This is kind of the discussion that we had around Christian movies. But I'll tell you, the one thing that I mentioned on there was one Christian movie that I thought, because it was early on and before a lot of these copycat ones, was Fireproof. Okay, I liked Fireproof. I thought it was a good movie. I thought it was pretty well done. Now, it is the classic Christian conception of a Christian movie where you set up the first stage of interrelationship drama in the first part of the movie, and then you have this humbling moment and a saving moment, and then you have reconciliation and you have a really happy music montage. Okay, so it's kind of the Hallmark formula, if you will. But it works in limited circumstances, just like the Hallmark Channel. It actually works. The problem is, if you're in the Christian movie industry, that's the only play you can call. And that's the problem, is that every movie doesn't fit that. Every story doesn't fit that. And I'm immediately drawn to the movie that just came out, Gosnell, which I have not seen yet because I really honestly am trying to brace myself for what I know it's going to be. And Gosnell is the story of the most prolific serial killer in American history, who was Kermit Gosnell, the raving mad abortionist who would just kill children after they were born, and just all sorts of horrific stories. Seriously, go Google the guy if you don't know who he is. But this is a true story, and it just happened a few years ago. He was actually caught. But instead of this being a mainstream movie, which it really should have been given the subject matter, it was a Christian movie, which means that you would get into the trailer and you would see what looks like an actual serious crime drama type movie, and you thought, oh, this is really interesting. I heard about this story. It's really fascinating. And then the inspirational music kicks in, and you see the same familiar faces that you've seen in other Christian films, and all of a sudden you're crying on someone's shoulder talking about their, family situation, and it kind of goes down the same path, you see? And it's like, part of why my heart sunk when I saw that was like, there's so much potential in that movie for a lot of people who may or may not know who Kermit Gosnell was, to be able to go out and say, okay, this is a movie that I would watch for its own value, for the story. And hey, there's probably a good moral that we can get out of that without explicitly turning it into a repeat of Fireproof. Does that make sense, Josh Hugo?
Oh, it absolutely does. No, I didn't see the trailer you're talking about. Are you telling me they actually put like inspirational pop music into the Gosnell trailer?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was rough.
That is, I mean, like I said, I haven't seen the movie. I do plan to see that movie. It's on my list. But I mean, just knowing the subject matter, to hear that they would do that in the trailer, to me sounds offensive, because that is a subject that is so dark and so horrible and deserves to be treated with such, I guess, gravity. That sounds like trivializing from what you just said.
Well, I don't think so. I think it's more the situation where the old I guess you would call them memes from back in the day, where the organist falls asleep at the piano or at the organ in church, and then he kind of wakes up and plays whatever was playing last.
I don't mean it sounds
kind of
like
that. I think that's how the ads work. That's how the trailers work for Christian movies. Is whatever inspirational tune you ended it on the last one, you just pick it up on this one.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't mean to say the movie sounds like it's like that, but the trailer, the way the trailer's been, sounds like it would probably be diminishing that. And what you just said sounds almost exactly like my reaction to the trailer for the movie Priceless that I saw recently. It's another Christian movie, and Priceless is a movie. Again, I haven't seen that movie either. But this one I don't really feel like I want to see based on the trailer. And again, the trailer, it shows it's about human trafficking. And in a nutshell, it's about this guy who is unwittingly involved in a human trafficking scheme and is transporting these two girls to become sex slaves basically. And he realizes what he's doing unwittingly and decides to rescue them from their gangster captors, right? And so that sounds like a really serious, dark crime drama, which it seems like is what it should have been, but kind of the same thing that you just said about the Goswell trailer. It's like, so 2/3 of the way through, suddenly this like upbeat, inspirational pop song starts playing. And it's like a happy music montage. It's like a feel good thing. I'm like, no, this doesn't work. You can't set up this trailer with this dark and ominous story about this downtrodden guy trying to save these child prostitutes from gangsters, and then suddenly switch over and be playing some inspirational song off of Christian pop radio to conclude it.
Right. Yeah. So what's with that? Why can't Christian studios seem to make a good Christian movie? And let me add a little bit of context to that. Okay, that is not to say that Christian movies do not perform well, because that would not be true. Mm-hmm. Christian movies perform very well, but they're critically panned, and with good reason. And that's the problem, is a lot of people, again, like a lot of people go into these things, especially from evangelical church culture, go into it just like I do, which is, I want to like this. I want to give money to these studios in the hopes that they will get better. But I still come out of it somewhere between disappointed and embarrassed.
Mm-hmm. Well, like we already said, I think it's because there are rules for a Christian movie. And one of the rules, sort of alluded to in that trailer, is there has to be an unambiguous happy ending. At the end of the movie, all the problems have to be resolved cleanly and neatly and wrapped up in a bow. And frankly, very few good stories really end that way, with happy endings for everybody and everybody having good outcomes. That's not how good stories generally work.
Well, I don't understand that, because I was told that Jesus was going to fix everything in my life and I'd never have any more problems anymore. I was going to get healthy and wealthy, and all my relationships would work, and everything was going to work out great. So that's the way it works, right? Like, why wouldn't the movies be that way?
That's the way it works in Christian movie land, yeah. But strangely enough, that's not really the way it works in the Bible. If you read stories from the Bible, they're actually a lot more, I'll say, gritty than Christian movies tend to be. I mean, you look at a story like, if you read the story of Samson in the book of Judges, that is a twisted, messed up story.
Yes, it very much is.
And even though Samson, kind of redeems himself at the end, it's still a dark, morbid ending with him. Samson committing suicide in order to kill 1,000 other people along with him in the rubble. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's not. You don't play a happy pop song over that ending, man. That's dark. That's grim and gruesome.
There's a recommendation for them. Yeah. Actually, you know what?
Yes.
We need a parody channel just for that, man. We need a parody channel just for that. We'll put it on our list for this week, okay?
Sure, yeah.
No, but you're right, though. That's the gravity at the end of that. I mean, you could picture trying to put together a movie about someone like Samson and having it turn out like Gladiator, right? Mm-hmm. Like, sure, the hero dies in the end, but he saves the Republic. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, you can see situations in which that could be really well done. It tends to not be really well done, and hasn't been for quite some time, with a few notable exceptions. There was an article that I thought was really interesting. It was actually in the Telegraph a couple years ago. Said, "Has Hollywood finally found God?" And it was talking about the success of Christian movies and the audiences that go to them. Just a couple of paragraphs I thought were interesting out of there. The quote: "But people aren't watching these movies to spot future Oscar winners. They're watching them for inspiration and to validate an intellectual point of view. Christian movies are one of the very few genres of film that people go to with the intention of enjoying them, whether they objectively suck or not," along with camp, and their flaws actually affirm that they're not slick Hollywood products from the liberal stable. Just like Donald Trump's gaffes prove he's no PC shill, so bad acting in Christian movies proves that they're not being cranked out by godless socialists. But it does beg the question, can one combine artistry, commercialism, and Christianity? DeMille did, in reference to the producer of the Ten Commandments. Mel Gibson did. Faith inspires beauty. We have thousands of years of art to prove it, yet the contemporary Christian auteur of cinema has yet to be found. Box office receipts suggest that an audience is waiting. And that's how the article closes out. But I thought that really, it made a couple salient points in there to me. One, that a lot of Christians have so much disdain for Hollywood that they're willing to put up with subpar trash movies because they're trying to stick it to the Hollywood establishment, which I can actually relate to. I mean, that actually kind of makes sense to me. But then, the begging the question: can you actually combine artistry, commercialism, and Christianity in an age when we are, as a Western culture, moving away from those things?
Well, I think that's been tested and proven that yes, you certainly can. The last overtly, blatantly Christian movie that I can think of, I think was really a great movie. Not just like, oh, it was okay for a Christian movie, but a movie that was like really, really good, and you wanted to watch it again a second time or third time or fourth time, was The Prince of Egypt, which came out in 1998. That was what year is it now? Yeah, that was 20 years ago now. The Prince of Egypt came out, but The Prince of Egypt was just by any measure an excellent movie. It was.
We just watched that this week actually with my kids.
Good job. Good parenting there, Joel. I approve.
Yeah.
I place my good parent sticker upon you.
Well, I mean, if I'm honest, I wanted to watch it. The kids were sort of incidental. It was just, it was, hey, it's on Netflix. Let's do this.
Yeah. Well, you're teaching them good. but yeah, but
Netflix sponsorship incoming. Yeah. No.
But so yeah, Prince of Egypt was it was a huge commercial success. It made back its budget 4 or 5 times. And it was full of Hollywood stars. Its production,
huge cast.
Yeah.
Huge cast on that thing. What are some of the big names that were in that? There was
Patrick Stewart,
Jeff Goldblum. Yeah, Patrick Stewart, Jeff Goldblum.
Sandra Bullock was in it.
Right. There's just huge, unbelievable list of actors and actresses. I think Val Kilmer, Danny Glover. I mean, these are people who now it's hard to picture them taking on any remotely religious role now. But all these people got together for an animated film about the life of Moses. That's kind of shocking.
Yeah. But the thing about the Prince of Egypt is, I mean, it was such a good movie because it told the story of Exodus. So it told it straight, and the story of Exodus, if you just read it, it's like, okay, obviously, Moses wins at the end, but there's a lot of tragedy and conflict in that story, in the story of Moses. And the Prince of Egypt just played it straight. They said, okay, Pharaoh Ramesses, Pharaoh in the movie, is a sympathetic character. You can see where he's coming from with the desire to preserve his people, with the desire to live up to the image and expectations of being the Pharaoh. And when I read the story in Exodus, I kind of see the same thing. When Pharaoh hardens his heart because he just can't fathom the idea of surrendering. He's Pharaoh. He's like, God on earth, according to his own beliefs. He can't just surrender to this Hebrew God. And of course he's wrong. He's the bad guy, but there's a human drama there, and there's a sympathetic nature to that. And the Prince of Egypt really preserved that. And in many respects, that movie is a tragedy, and it shows, the tragic and the ironic, aspects of the story and the suffering in the story. And that's why it works so well. Because everything isn't neat and tidy.
It really did, and I'll confess, I was on the verge of tears a couple of times watching it because of some of those elements that and of course a couple of them now that are different. When I watched it the first time, I was pretty young, and now 20 years later, I'm watching this as a father, and the Passover means a lot more to me because I've got sons. And looking at the last plague of the firstborn being killed and everything, that's a big deal. And they didn't try to run from that fact in this animated film. Like that was front and center, was the gravity of this whole situation, the destruction of a nation for one man's pride. And that's the kind of gravity that seems to be lacking from a lot of these anymore. And again, despite the best intentions, I don't try to cast aspersions on anyone's intentions. I know that these movies were made by a lot of dedicated people who are very sincere, and very knowledgeable and very talented. I don't doubt that for a minute. But Hollywood has not. There hasn't always been this break. And if you go back far enough, I could not find the article for this show. I looked everywhere, but I read an article several years ago about the history of Hollywood and how the Hollywood itself was actually saved at 2 different points by Bible movies, how the industry was actually struggling for a time. And the movie that came along to bail them out was the 10 Commandments. That's what got them out of a serious time of difficulty after World War II, when Hollywood was kind of struggling to reestablish a foothold. It was a Bible movie that got them out of it. And then that was followed up by Ben-Hur. And then there have been these movies that were massive cultural hits that were based on the Bible, because the Bible, guess what, is full of awesome stories, which is why people have referred to those stories for years and years for endless number of morals and fables and all these things. I don't say fables as in untrue, but fables as in having a moral.
Good save.
Yeah, you got to be specific, right? You got to be specific. But there, that does raise the question of now, like, what qualifies? Because what happened, and I've actually been talking to folks about this in terms of music lately, is somehow we sort of industrialized Christianity, where now you have to have a quote Christian movie. Can't have a secular movie that is about Christian themes, and you just have to have a Christian movie, and then you have to answer the question of how Christian is Christian enough. And the way that this broke down when I was growing up was in music, like I said. So we were only allowed to listen to Christian music for most of my upbringing. And then I got into college, and somebody tossed me Hybrid Theory by Linkin Park, and it was a little bit of a sudden change for me. but there was constantly this question, and it's sort of ongoing debate in the Christian music industry, is how Christian is Christian enough, right? Because when you had a band that didn't really want to adopt a Christian label, people were very critical. The Christian community would be like, okay, are they ashamed of the gospel? Why don't you want to sign with a Christian label? And some of these folks came out and said, well, we want to reach a secular audience, so we're not going to sign with a Christian label because we want to try to establish a brand outside of that and then try to be that bridge that people can cross. And of course, a lot of us at the time thought, well, that's kind of a cop-out. You chose secular praise and
you sold
fame
out, man.
over the gospel. Right. You sold out, man. And so that was kind of what we thought back then. But I think time has sort of shown that they were the more effective ones. And it's just really interesting to me to see that dynamic, how that's played out, is that, you have this sort of Christian book story culture that has impacted our music and our movies and our art across the board, and sort of pulled it into its own little corner and said, here, if you're part of this niche market, come buy from us instead. And you're competing with things that are, objectively much better. And the effect that it's had on our art is deplorable as well, because it just makes us lazy. And I heard a great presentation by a fellow by the name of Steel Crosswhite. He used to be in a really popular band, left it to perform music in the church, actually. And he ripped into worship leaders and said, you guys are you're second rate and you're lazy, and you don't give this your best because it's church, and you think you're always going to play into the same people. It doesn't matter what you do. You can just throw out whatever crap you want, and people have to listen to it because they have to be nice and clap and sing and do all the right things. But we actually have something to sing about. We should have the best music. Our music should be putting secular music to shame. And he just really challenged everyone. It was really kind of cool. I wish we had a Steel Crosswhite to give that message to the Christian movie industry.
This is kind of a tangent, I guess, but why do we have a Christian movie industry? Why don't we just have people who are Christians going out into the movie industry? It seems so goofy to me. It's like we don't have there's not a Christian building industry, there's not like a Christian, car manufacturing industry. It's like you just make it the car and you make it a good car. And I guess from my perspective, it's like, why there shouldn't be a Christian industry. There should just be Christians in the industry. And I think just even the idea that we have to have this divide is causing or, exacerbating the problems you mentioned.
Well, and then we run into this situation. So this is a chicken and egg situation, right? Because if you say that now, that Christians should just go be part of the movie industry, what they will tell you is that they're blacklisted. And that's very hard for Christian actors or producers or any of that to get any traction in Hollywood. And those who are there, who maybe even at one time were mainstream hits, have a hard time having any sort of social connections at all because they're treated like outcasts. But the question is, has that always been the case, or did that become the case when Christians decided to sort of pull out and go their own direction? And that's a question I can't answer. I don't have any connections in that side of things, and it could be that it really is just Hollywood turned a corner, dropped off all of their willingness to interact with anything religious, and now you're a leper if you go in there and you attend church. I don't know.
Well, I don't know, but I do know that just the Prince of Egypt proves that wasn't the case as much as 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, right. I mean, you could at least pitch a story then, and you can, in fairness, you can make the case that Hollywood has tried to do some Christian themed or biblical themed movies since then. So you had Gods and Kings, which was a rehashing of Moses with Christian Bale. You had the Noah movie, which was really rejected by Christian audiences
nothing
everywhere
to do
for being
with the Bible.
right, which was really an unfaithful representation. But if you're in Hollywood, you think, well, we're trying our best. What does it take to please these people? And what's really interesting, if you compare the box office receipts of those movies, which were major Hollywood productions, versus awful Christian movies like God's Not Dead. No offense to anyone involved in it, but it was just a bad movie. It was poorly done, and I think most importantly to me, not to make it overly personal, but I brought an unsaved friend with me to watch that movie, thinking that it was going to be a great way to sort of start the right conversations, and I was terribly embarrassed. I mean, it was insulting to anyone who is a semi-critical agnostic or atheist person, and I wanted to start those conversations. I never got the chance because that movie was just insufferable. And I think that's sort of a lot of things that they're more aiming to rile up the base, to borrow another Trump term, than to really address any concerns across the line. Now, contrast that to a movie like Silence, which was not a Christian-made film, but was very, very, very deep in the philosophical and the theological questions that it asked. I mean, it was a very, very intense movie. I would have a hard time. It's one of those movies that, I just saw it, and I thought it's going to be a while before I think I can bring myself to watch this again. Very difficult to watch, but very, very meaningful. Captured a lot of important themes of faith and persecution and endurance and sacrifice, and a lot of the things that really, frankly, were missing from movies like War Room.
Well, the thing is, I saw the movie Silence, your recommendation, Joel. I liked it. I thought it was good. As far as me, it would never be called a Christian movie because the movie itself doesn't come down on any side. You can watch the movie as an atheist, and the movie doesn't prove that God exists or even claim that God exists. The movie simply shows the struggle of, the Christians in Japan and what they went through, and shows things from their perspective without really taking a side. But by doing that, by simply showing the struggles of the priests and the Japanese Christians, it makes you ask questions. It makes you question, well, what is faith? What justifies belief? What is the truth, and what is the importance of truth? And asking those questions, once you start asking those questions, your mind becomes open to accepting ideas about God, of the gospel, or even just to think about the human condition. And a movie like the ones we're complaining about, like God's Not Dead, doesn't do that because it's not realistic. It's not about realistic, believable experiences, and it doesn't leave any questions open. It's like in this isolated little bubble detached from real life, and you can watch it. And okay, if you agree with it, you feel validated, and if you don't, then you just don't. There's nothing to do with it. Whereas a movie like Silence, even if it doesn't really express its own viewpoint as far as religion goes, it leaves you thinking. And I mean, isn't that the first step?
Well, yeah, and there are, a well done piece of art, a well done movie, and I don't pretend to be any pretentious art critic. I'm not, but something that's well done can be appreciated outside the immediate cultural context, right? I mean, I saw Kingdom of Heaven, which is a historical drama about the Crusades, or set during the Crusades, and I was fascinated with the portrayal of Islam. I'm not a Muslim. I am, up to speed on the war of the religions as far as the world goes, and I took comparative religions, and I get it. I had a general understanding of it, but their portrayal of Islam was fascinating to me. And I think if you do a movie right, you can get that. You can get people from outside the immediate Christian market to ask the appropriate what ifs. And I think that is the central point this is the central challenge, I think, of the Christian entertainment industry, is how to get people to look beyond that day-to-day grind. And I think you see little bits and pieces of this across Christian art when you get, a singer or an actor that kind of gets that. They sort of throw one of those lines in there. And I guess what I'm really thinking of is I'm thinking of there was a stretch of a couple years where any Christian song that said there's got to be more to life, or more than this, or whatever, got popular. It just did. Like, it was Switchfoot and Stacey Orico and I think a couple others, but they got mainstream hits because that's a question that people generally ask. People generally go through life day to day and get bored with it and say, there's got to be more than this. And that's a great place for Christians to reach out and have that crossover appeal. We can do that in movies too, right? And I don't want to be, I would love to have another hour of the broadcast here to be able to say, hey, let's go, let's go brainstorm a great Christian movie. And maybe that's a question we'll throw to you guys this week on social media. And tell us, like, what ideas do you have for Christian movies and for the Christian movie industry? What are some ways that we can be constructive about making this better? And then maybe the question to sort of wrap this up and tie it together is this. And this is something that I think we need to take very seriously as anybody that's invested in seeing the Christian message go out in any sort of art form. Is it really even possible for Christian-themed entertainment to be actually cool? I don't know, because like I said, when you go back to music, I remember listening to the band Lifehouse, and I thought that I was a rebel for doing that because I was 16 years old. They came out, they were popular. Oh, this is so cool! I am going to sneak out and buy a Lifehouse album. That's going to be my act of rebellion, which is pretty pathetic on its own. But but I went out there and I got this album, and then a week later, I heard their single on Christian radio. And I almost was disappointed because I felt like they couldn't be cool anymore if I heard them on Christian radio. Does that make any sense? Like I just felt like they couldn't be actually cool if I heard them on Christian radio. And it's the same thing when I let people know that the band Switchfoot was Christian, who did not before know. It was like they immediately got this disappointed look on their face. Oh, they're Christians. Well, that's lame. So I think there's also definitely, I'm not saying that Christian art doesn't start behind the 8 ball. We kind of do. But I just think there's got to be ways to get around that, and hopefully we'll be able to come up with the solutions this week. If you are not following us on Facebook and Twitter, not only will you not be able to join that conversation, but you're also not going to get the chance to weigh in on next week's subject, which is your IQ. Does it affect your destiny? Does it control your destiny? How about the destiny of your nation? Well, tune in and check that out. Make sure you follow us on Facebook and Twitter, facebook.com/TheCI Show, and on Twitter @TheCI Show. Thanks for joining us tonight on Constructive Interference.